So, when you think of the concept of healing, what comes to mind? What does healing feel like to you? What does healing look like to you? How would you envision a healing? How would you envision a healer? These are some of the things I'm going to talk about today. Hi, I'm Heather Ann Ferri, and welcome to the Healing Pain 3 channel. I'm going to start with a wasp. You know, being a shaman, and I'm specifically a water shaman, but being a shaman, that comes from my lineages. I've always had a deep connection with animals, and recently in the last couple of years, that has heightened to deep, deep levels because animals, they're so in tune naturally because they're not being programmed all day long. So I'm going to talk to you about the wasp. Give you an example because somebody a couple months ago asked, what kind of healing could you get from a wasp? Well, first of all, in my home, my interpretation of the wasp energy, now this is my interpretation. Your experiences or you as a healer could be completely different, okay? But my interpretation of the wasp, whenever a wasp would enter the room, specifically my bedroom or my healing room, it was usually after somebody was in my house to do water pickups, to pick up medical grade water. And sometimes those energies had entities or they were karmics. And I interpreted that way, that this wasp was warning me that there was negative energy and I needed to sage, that I needed to be aware to not maybe bring that person into my house. It's actually why I stopped doing water pickups. But so that gives you an example. And I'm not fond of the wasp. I prefer the queen bee and bees. So one day, this was a few months ago in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was a sunny day in the midst of still winter. So I was taking advantage, going for my walk, visiting the donkey, which I'll talk about later. And I found a spot where I could just feel the sun. And I sat down on a rock. Okay. So I'm in nature, I'm by myself, and I'm sad. And I call in the Divine Mother, my guide, the Great Mother, Big Mama, however way you want to interpret her. And I do an Indian chant because sometimes that resonates with me from my past life in India. And I'm really setting the intention of doing a few meditations with her to work with her. And I'm healing my heart over my issues with divine love. And as soon as I set it up, just set up the intention and I'm getting ready to move into a meditation chant, there's this buzzing in my crown chakra. And before I could figure out, think about the idea if it's a bee, if it's a wasp, I humanly go like this to move that thing and it stings me. It's a wasp and lands. I realize it's a wasp that was buzzing in the crown, which if you are intuitive and a healer, you're probably already putting the dots of the story together. If you don't know anything about this stuff, keep listening. It's going to be interesting. And all of a sudden, I set the intention with the Divine Mother. I'm trying to heal my heart with my divine love. A wasp stings me in the pinky and it's swelling. and it hurts. And now I'm in pain. And honestly, I started crying because I was in pain. And then I was like, oh, I got to get rid of this. So I use my masculine hand and I take the pinky like I would do with energy work. And I take the pain out. So now I'm able to heal and work on myself. I used to be very masterful. And I'm going to talk about that. Never promoted it, never really understood the heightened of my gifts till now. And I think being humble is an important thing, but I think mastering something is also important. And it just is what it is. So I took it, took the pain out, still was a little swelling. I was focusing on it, and I knew there was no coincidence to this being a shaman. So now I'm breathing and I'm feeling the pain from the voice. This is the voice meridian when you're doing brain rewiring, communication skills, to the heart. The feminine heart not being able to communicate, not being heard, not being respected. Because I had voiced to a divine love that he hurt me and he fluffed it off like my family. I didn't do that. My voice didn't matter. And so I felt and I cried and I cried and I could feel the whole line of pain from the voice to the heart. And I cried and I allowed myself, and I was all about safety and protection. I was feeling these things with men. Safety and protection, which, if you're listening to this, is the biggest issue in America with women right now. And you can tell the women that feel safe, but you also have to ask yourself, do they only feel safe in their home? Do they only feel safe in their neighborhood? Because a lot of the women I see have tons of inflammation, rigid bodies, tight bodies. What is that saying? I'm not safe, right? So after, I would say it was about maybe 10 minutes, I was calmed down. I was starting to get information. Actually, my brother came through first, information. And then the wasp was watching the whole time. The whole time. And I looked at the wasp and I said, look, I thank you. I did not like this that you stung me. It hurt. But I thank you for this healing. You opened a door into a channel, but I'm not going to kill you, but you need to go now. And the wasp went. This happens all the time. We need to interconnect with our children again about the wisdom of plants, the wisdom of land, the dirt, the wisdom of water, the wisdom of animals. And I just want to sort of break it up, because you always think a healer is a human being or an angelic ancestor. Healing can come in so many ways, shapes, and forms if you stay open. And if you become trained to understand healing. If we have a very limited idea of what healing is or what it looks like, and let's face it, for I don't know how many hundreds of years, we have had a lot of male rulers as the healery types, and we've had a lot of them taken down as the predators. So one of the things I'm very proud of with the brain protocols and the water and everything I do is I'm just a guide, guiding you into advancement. And how you use these tools will be a different dance than how I use them. But I do think some of them are the foundational of how we use them. I've spoken many, many times about this, but I don't know what city or state or country you live in. But I know in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the last 10 years, the amount of plastic and trash on the ground everywhere on the sides of the roads is increasing. That lets me know the state of mental instability, of PTSD, of being so consumed with so much stress or responsibilities or addictions or problems that we think it's okay to put our trash down on the ground, that somebody else can be responsible for that. That is, in some sense, a predator energy, to be honest with you. And it concerns me. So not only am I concerned about what type of food and water our children are drinking, and I think we need to be practical about that right now, I'm also concerned that there will be empaths or advocates that will come and spend a Saturday or Sunday, and you'll see them cleaning up the trash, but the trash is just going to end up back there, as we see, because the same people are putting and trashing the soil and poisoning the water. That's why I am submitting to certain leadership podcasts and trying to engage with higher conscious leaders to really understand the deep rootedness of this, because it does go back to the inner child. I'm starting to express what I always had as an inner child. I was an amazing energy force of understanding emotional intelligence and stability in a household of war. I was an amazing energy field to consume such high frequency or low frequency of traumas beyond belief and still live. And I believe a lot of children have all of this purity. But like I said, everything around us, everything inside of us represents. And so, yes, I am concerned. So that's my wasp story. You know, everywhere you go, even if you don't have animals, because I don't have animals, but they're all around me. Everywhere you go, if you're going on a trip or you're in the park and you see a deer and you come face to face, that deer is a spirit guide of information for you. If you go somewhere and you see a raccoon, I've seen raccoons several times and you're face to face. You know, here's another story. I mean, I have several stories about raccoons. I'll tell you another story about raccoons. Divine Mother sent me to Franklin, Tennessee. That's in book 2. I go down by a river. I walk up the hill and I'm faced with a raccoon out of nowhere. And I'm staring at this raccoon, and raccoons really symbolize take off the mask. That's my interpretation for me personally. So I would say it was a couple weeks ago. I was sitting on my back porch at night. I have this sensory light. So if you drive by, the light goes on because it's really dark in the back. I have a little bit of land and a big tree and some land. We have a lot of, possums and raccoons and cats, sometimes a fox, sometimes a coyote, deer, bunnies. I love it. And I sit back there waiting to be entertained. Who's going to show up? Sometimes I meow, meow, meow to see if the cats come out, But I was with the Divine Mother again, kind of having a conversation about my divine love. And guess who shows up? A raccoon. And it senses the light goes on and it stares at me. And I'm staring at it back. And I'm like, divine love, take off your mask. Oh, and that's the magic. When you start getting out there and seeing that some of your healers are insects and bugs and animals too. Mexico. I brought up Mexico in my last video on Mother's Day, which I was pretty emotional. So I was just like, I'm just gonna get this out there. Out there to the Divine Mother, to the ancestors, to the ethers, you know. But then I was thinking more about Mexico. You know, I bring up the magic of this, which there's a lot of other magic um, and manifestation stuff. But then I was like really thinking about the time in Mexico because it was honestly, I didn't want to leave. As much as I wanted to be by myself, the energy of the women was very draining and toxic. But the hut that I found, I just wanted to stay there forever. I had a very, very deep spiritual connection to where I was located. And truly grateful for the experience because it's the yin and the yang, right? It's the dark and the light. What was interesting about, and it was a last minute job, and it was something that I was kind of iffy on because it was so unorganized and it ended up being a disaster business wise and unorganized. And I paid a big price for it as a healer. I really believe in contracts, business contracts. I think healers need to have them and they need to understand their worth. And that's really where I'm moving forward as well. We need to understand the frequency of energy healers. It's the highest frequency, so it should be paid the most. And I think that that's part of my mission moving forward is to reconstruct what we see in frequency and currency and all that. So anyway, when I got there, the mountain was huge. And each level had a place you could stay. So the different students were staying, and I was placed at the root, which I knew wasn't a coincidence because I heal root issues, which is honestly the hardest because we always want to get to a certain level. We think we're good. We're like, yeah, the roots, like, ugh. You know, when you look at the roots of the trees when they come out of the ground and you see how thick they are and ancestral, it's deep, you know. So I'm about the red chakra, the fire, the root. Let's burn all this karma up and let's get it going. So I knew that there wasn't a coincidence. And I knew there was an intuitive connection to the woman who hired me. And I have a deep love for her, even though the whole thing was a disaster. And I think she would admit it now. Like, I think we all grow and we all evolve, and it was all played out the way it was supposed to be played out. I was specifically hired to work with the childhood trauma brain protocol, which I did very little of. The first day, there was all these different and the event, the women were there because they were on a raw food regimen, fruit based. They only ate fruit, and I was not that. I was headed toward veganism, but not there yet. So the first day, and I send love to all these people, by the way, like I send love, but I got to teach this, right? I got to grow. And I think that, you know, they probably all have grown and evolved too. But the first day of the experience, there was all these activities and stuff that I didn't understand. Like I couldn't understand connecting and playing and improvising to connect, but there was a lot of role playing that seemed codependent and attachment oriented that didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like a healing retreat. And I was a little guarded. And then the kitchen, there were certain hours where they were eating their fruits. And I just didn't really subscribe to that protocol. I went when I felt like I needed food. Like if I'm going to teach and utilize energy, I'm going to eat at this time. So I just didn't subscribe to that. But after the first day with two of the lead teachers, I could see so much negative karma going on. I was like, oh, I think this is going to be a disaster. So I said, I'm not going to teach up here. I'm going to go down the hill. That's going to be my classroom. And I found a hut down the hill. So, and it was a beautiful hut that overlooked the ocean. And I had incredible moments with Yahshua and the Divine Mother, like incredible. And I'm not a religious person. I'm not a Bible person. You'll learn more about, you know, the details of that within my book series. It's been used a lot in a lot of different fashions to try to bondage me and limit who I am and judge me. So I just don't subscribe to that type of psychology. But the first day, you know, I go with my intuition, even though I have a plan, and I have the women standing and I'm working on their posture. And all of a sudden we're working on some chanting and I place my hands on their feet, which is very traditional in certain lineages in India for healings. And all of a sudden, you know, if I place my hands on a woman's feet, she started to shake. So I'm pulling out from the root chakra, obviously the feet are chakra one, shake and cry. And I'm used to doing energy work on a table, you know, because I write in book one, my 8th chapter, my energy healer my first energy teacher was amazing. She's the real deal. She's still around. She's much older than me. She moved to Tennessee, and I write about her because my dad came into that, my first healing as his higher consciousness. And I didn't know what that meant back then. He was still alive. And I'm not in much contact with her at this moment, but I was the pivotal. She actually worked with me. I did meditation and work with her to help her poverty issues, because I felt like she was being overworked and undervalued. And she was way beyond a Reiki teacher. She was way beyond. And I used to argue with her about the way you certify a Reiki person, like in Japan, because I have a past life in Japan, you would spend like 10,000 hours and intern and you would clean out and detox. But here you do like 2 days, you get a piece of paper and you're working on people's energies. And, you know, we can have good intentions and do that with our family, but actually being paid to do something, I think you should have a little bit more training. And she agreed with me, but I would be in training with her and be like, some of these people, it's not a judgment, but it's kind of like, whoa, like, and I really am very particular now about who touches me. Very particular after everything I've learned in the last couple of years. So just to give you a little, like my first teacher was she is amazing, like amazing. And really I remember some of the training, I already knew all the symbols. I was like, I already did this in a past life. I was like, this is all new to me. So when I went to Mexico, I did not expect that, you have a traditional idea of you go on a table and this is the way it works. It was just like, I was touching women and they were shaking and crying and I had to hold them. And it was like beyond anything I was even prepared for, because I was hired to do brain work. After the first hour, I remember all of the women walking up the hill looking like, what just happened? And I just heard this voice of like, you've met a healer. This isn't a show. And I don't mean to insult anyone, but a lot of times in the religious, and I've been in some of those churches where everybody falls to the ground and I'm sitting there like, is this a show? Like, what's going on here? I don't understand what's going on, because it wasn't the same type of shaking that when I went to another evangelist, I had that experience, and that wasn't a show. So I get the yin and the yangs experiences. And for the average public, you don't know anything. Like, I know tons of people in Pittsburgh, PA, 10 years ago that spent their life fortune to go to Brazil to be healed from John of God. Well, look up John of God, because he's in jail right now. Look up what he was all about. You know what I mean? So we've had a lot of this happening, and that's why I ask you, so that you become independent, because I want my students always to be independent of how you define healing. And the sad part is because we're so used to putting Band-Aids on symptoms, we want quick results. And unfortunately, like, that did not happen with me. It doesn't happen with a lot of the clients that I've seen that have healed. And you have to define what is healing, yeah. So that was the first thing that happened in the Mexico experiences. And then what really happened is I was doing too much energy work and not balancing myself out and not having what I need, which is my electrolyzed reduced water to replenish me. I have to know that I'm a water shaman, and water plays a huge part in cleansing and replenishing me. So, I would break all the food rules. And what was interesting about that what I basically saw was women with eating disorders ruled by a dictator, right? And so childhood trauma, but they don't really want to do the childhood trauma, like it was really an interesting concept, but the kitchen was a disaster energetically, like just dirty and bugs and flies. It was just like a disaster. And it was like, ooh, because to me, a kitchen is cleansing, and it's like there was no sitting at the table together. There was no praying before the food. There was none of that. It was really wild. And these people pay a lot of money to do this stuff, go to these retreats. Like, it's like, what's your toolkit? Well, how does this work long term? Not just in this life, but the next, for your ancestral lineage. So I come with a lot of mystical, magical gifts, and I think I'm just stepping into understanding how powerful I am. The goal is to stay humble, but I also come with practicality, and I think that comes from blue collar roots, and I want to keep that as much as possible as well. Um, I always laugh at the whole woo-woo thing because I've been around a lot of woo-woo people, and I've seen behind closed doors. I won't want that life. So you can be all high up here and I channel this and this and this. And then you go and you're like, what is your practicality and what's going on in your relationships and how are you interacting? Are you disassociating? Because a lot of this can be disassociating too. When you don't have the roots. Chakra 1, 2, 3. What was the other thing about? So I wasn't prepared, but that's okay. You get thrown into jobs that you're not prepared for. It was an activation. So it was really interesting. I love to be in nature, but I love to sleep in a bed, so I'm not like a camper type person. It's totally kind of changed. It depends on the scenario, but I remember there was this, forget what you call it, but something you could sleep in and lay in the hut that I was teaching at. And I spent a couple nights sleeping there, listening to the water. I was in it was beyond anything. I mean, I just felt like I felt Yahshua was like right here, like literally. And it was just like love and love. And, I also didn't interact with, I call them the girls. I didn't interact with women. I was the teacher, and then I separated myself where the other teachers interacted more. I just felt like I had to keep those boundaries so that I could do my job because had a job to do, whether they wanted to so I did some brain work, but I mostly did energy work and chanting vocal work, which I think is definitely my expertise. Um, and then I explained in my last video, I had a pretty profound healing that was exhausting. Like I literally had trouble walking, and I was really grateful because the head person who hired me did create a very heavy potato meal that I needed. Nobody asked me about what happened. The person who watched it, like I said, I've watched her grow over the years, go through a lot of things. And so I was revisiting that because it really was the activation of, I went through a lot of things as an energy healer that nobody else was talking about, that I wasn't sure what was going on. And there was a part of me that started to stop doing that because it was like, I started to see the patterns of codependency on energy healers, which I've talked about in past videos. And I think people really need to step into doing shadow work, spiritual psychology work, medical meditation work. You need to understand you. And so I think those things get skipped over a lot, but it all comes back to energy. So the last thing I'm going to share is the donkey. I've talked in past videos about the white donkey. The white donkey has quite a personality. I've learned so much and I write about it. So I'm not going to share some of the teachings for book 3, but recently I was over at, I call the farm, and the judge was there, and I could sense that he is afraid of the donkey. And the donkey can get aggressive. He can be a handle. I've had to yell at him. And he listens to me. But he can be, as the judge described it, a stallion, which I thought about my dad. And I was like, well, if my dad shapes us into this, then yeah, you're right. He is definitely, my dad in his younger years was definitely very, type energy and a stallion. But he was describing that. And I was like, yeah, he definitely has. I know when he's coming to me, what type of mood he's in. Just like when you come home or from work, you should know by looking at the energy of your partner, what type of energy they have. All this is interconnected. This doesn't have to be learned by watching a video. This is interconnected through healing, through teaching. So like when the donkey comes, when I call the donkey, he knows my voice. He likes my voice. He knows something is resonating. He knows he's going to get carrots and apples. Sometimes he runs and he's very vocal and excited. Sometimes he walks like, okay, I'm coming. Sometimes I can just tell what moods he's in before he even gets there. And all types of moods like we have, sometimes he wants me to pet him for a while. And I love that. He's like soaking in the healing energy. Sometimes he's like, he eats everything. He's like, see ya. And he's off. Sometimes he's like, I want more carrots. And he walks back and forth, trying to grab and eat things they shouldn't eat. And I'm like, stop it, donkey. You had enough. Personality. And he's brought out the childlike personality in me. Well, when I was with the judge, he needed to move the tractor in because he's taken down all these trees that have fallen from the storm. And he's like, can you get him over down the hill? So I did. We walked down. I had a stick with me, but we walked down the hill and I had him distracted. And he was really a good boy. And he was in a very loving mood. I told the judge if he was in a certain mood, I would say, no, I can't do that. But I could tell the mood he was in that he was going to listen to me. So we went down, the judge was able to get the tractor in, and then he came back up. And I said to him, I was explaining his personality, and he said, one of my, I don't know if it was a niece, I think it might be a niece, is taking a course online called The Donkey Whisperer. And I'm like, my career, I'm a donkey whisperer. This is where it's all led up to. I thought that was awesome. No, I was joking. I was like, I am definitely an animal whisperer, dog whisperer, cat whisperer. But I didn't know there were donkey whisperers. And I said, well, I'll be interested to hear how that works out. I think part of it is engaging. But the other thing I shared with the judge that I don't know if he got or not was after we had pretty severe storms, borderline tornado in Pittsburgh, which was a big deal. A lot of trees went down, a lot of power went down. He lucked out by just having trees, but they didn't hit any of the little houses he has and barn. But I said to him the next day, I noticed that the sheep did not come out of the barn. And when I called the donkey, he was cautious and he walked over. And when I placed my hand to pet him, he was shaking out trauma. He was traumatized because they have a big land, like a yard, but it's fenced in, so they can't necessarily escape a storm. So they're going into hibernation, into their safe place, into the barn with storm. But he was definitely, now when I first met him, it took about 8 interactions before I started touching him and working on those boundary issues. And when I did, he did shake as well. which I interpret as trauma out. So it was interesting because that day he was shaking. So I started talking to him and I said, yeah, that storm was scary. It was loud. And I'm sure you felt like you were concerned about the sheep and, there was nowhere to go but in the barn, and everything's okay now. It's a little bit of a mess, but everything's okay. You did a good job in protecting the sheep, and you can relax now. But he did shake, and I'm assuming because I'm a healer and the energy of my hands brought that out, just like in Mexico. So that's a little bit of a storyline of somebody who is a healer, somebody that also works with science, ancient sciences, I call them. And I just wanted to plant seeds for you, whether you are a healer or you're somebody that wants some healing or you're investigating in self-development, to just always consider to go back to those questions of how you define it. What's it look like? What's it feel like? What is the outcome you're desiring from it? I'm a long-term outcome person, which is why I was set up in the way I was set up, right? And I understand that because I didn't want to just heal a little bit. Like once my dad died, I was like, we're going full in. We're going to the roots of the roots, and that's not going to be for everybody in this moment in time. And that's cool. But you do want to sort of have an idea of where do these tools, how do they interact in everyday life? I always ask people that when they start to mention, oh, I did this retreat or did that. I said, great. What did you get from it? What type of tools do you have? Do you utilize those tools? How do you utilize those tools? When do they come in handy? We got to start asking more for our programs. So I'll leave you with that. Thanks for listening to me today. I hope it inspired you to look at your insects, wasps, and animals around you as beautiful energies that can provide teachings for you, even if it's a sting and it hurts, just like healing can hurt when you're pulling out the roots. But at the end, it's all good. So I'll leave you with that. Once again, I am Heather Ann Ferri. If you'd like to learn more about what I do, you can go onto my website at heatherannferri.com. I am a professional speaker, storyteller. I love to do group coachings on virtual Zoom online, partly because the brain protocols, it's really beneficial for people to be in their own spaces. And I talk about that in greater detail so people understand. Obviously, when you work with me, you get a little 99-cent notebook, pen, because as you're meditating, you're going to be dreaming and start to understand how do you become your own scientist and healer for yourself. I do private coaching. That's probably geared to somebody who's done some healing work and really just feels like they need some fine tuning or they need another toolkit. They want to advance. I think the beginner stuff is more for groups. And I'm definitely becoming a guest on podcasts. So if you have a podcast and you think that something on my website might be great for your audience, I'd be happy to have a conversation about that and see if we're a fit. And that's about it. So thank you so much. I hope you have a blessed, blessed day.